What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Rats on Film, the show where a bunch of film rats talk about and rank movies. Go Godzilla. Today on the show, we are talking about the all-time great monster, Godzilla. On the show with me today, I have Chris.
Hey.
Tim.
I usually do a joke when I introduce myself, but you already did Go Godzilla, so now I don't know what to say.
Is that what you had in your? Yeah. You had that preloaded?
Well, that's fine.
Stolen, snatched.
It wasn't a good joke.
What? Yeah. Even when I did
no,
it?
when you did it, it's fine.
Okay,
it was gonna be bad.
Good. You can be on more episodes.
Okay, good.
And I'm your host, Xander. Welcome to the show, everybody. Okay, so I have assembled the only two people I know who have seen every live-action Godzilla movie, which I think is right now sitting at like 124 or something like that. Movies like 125.
Close.
It's like 38. What is it?
You know, that's a great question. I don't remember.
I mean, which ones do you count? Are we just counting live action? Are we counting the animated?
I would
ones?
count the animated. So you haven't watched all of them yet. So
are we counting the American ones? So it's a big number.
Yeah.
We can leave it at that.
Is he the character with the most movies? Right. That's a fact, a stat that he has.
He is. Yeah, I think it was between him and Zatoichi.
I mean, he's been going strong since 1954. So we obviously too many movies to do all on one episode. I also have not seen all the Godzilla movies, not even close. I've seen a well-rounded amount, I think, but maybe like 10 total. The decision was made to do 7 movies for 7 decades of the Big Lizard Man. And then you two were like, these are the ones that are the best representation of the different eras and the different things we would want to talk about. And then also we picked ones that we like.
Yeah, well, it's his birthday, 70 years. And the thing about Godzilla, why it's sort of hard to do just a straight ranking of the best movies is they're all so different. I mean, across 30-something movies, they cover so many different grounds between serious, not serious, everything in between. It's kind of apples and oranges. So we've curated a selection of 7 movies that the goal was to try to capture as many different facets of the franchise as we can, rather than just the straight 7 best.
Yeah, and I feel like to capture the essence of the era they were in also.
Obviously, gotta include the original. Godzilla, 1954. Starts everything. And also just a really groundbreaking monster movie. I feel like it set up a lot of what 50s monster and horror movies became, and then going forward from there.
Yeah, I mean, the monster movie before this was not looked upon very favorably. Mainly B-movie stuff, and mainly not giant monsters. There have been a few giant monsters, King Kong, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. But Godzilla really kicked off a trend and really a new genre within the monster movie.
It's hard to say stuff that hasn't been said about how groundbreaking this film is, but also it tries to have a point.
Yeah, I mean, Godzilla's really cool because the crux of it revolves around the atomic bomb that was dropped in Japan in 1945. The movie comes out not quite 10 years later, and it's a really poignant look at the destruction that humans can cause with scientific advancements and stuff like that, and sort of the moral questions and qualms to have with that stuff, but put through this lens of a monster movie. And I don't know, it makes it really compelling because it's not just there for the scares. It's there for this sort of larger message that it's trying to convey. And that I'm sure is a very personal message to the Japanese people at the time when they made it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's really encompassed in the character of Shirozawa, the doctor, who makes this horrible weapon, but he doesn't know, is it worth using it? Because he doesn't want it released upon the world. And it kind of brings back to the nuclear bombs dropping on Japan.
That's one of the things that I find most fascinating about this movie is that the morality of it is not quite black and white. They make this movie and they could have easily just, made the whole thing a critique of the American government, which would have been totally justified.
Get them.
Yeah.
But it's not quite that simple. And Godzilla is a metaphor for the atom bomb, but at the same time, Godzilla is a victim here.
I think it becomes more pronounced in some of the other films. And Godzilla is such an interesting character because in different movies, he kind of represents different things. But in this movie, yeah, he's this victim of, specifically the atomic and nuclear era that the world entered into. But he does kind of become this personification of the environment and the way that human beings are affecting the world and how there are repercussions for the things that we do and are doing.
I think an important thing to also point out is that the movie is visually stunning.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
It looks so good now.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about a plethora of different Godzilla movies. I'm going to say this over and over. I'm very partial to Godzilla when he's a guy in a suit.
Yeah. Oh,
I love it. It looks great. I think it holds up. The miniature work is incredible. The effects work with his atomic breath. Like, it's not, it's not flashy like some later versions we get, but it is scary and it's cool and it works really well.
And even though it was of the time, it was just like this black and white imagery kind of amplifies the horror a little bit. There's like the dark shadows and the violence that's happening. Even though it wasn't maybe done on purpose,
sure,
they just didn't have option to do it in color. I think it helps it a lot.
I think sometimes limitations help creativity a little bit, and you kind of lean into, what you have to work with, and sometimes you can get really cool stuff out of that.
Yeah, the black and white is, to me, such an important part of the movie. I mean, the image that sticks in my head the most of any Godzilla film is Tokyo on fire, and the contrast between, the black sky and the white flames. And going back to Godzilla in a suit, I think something we may talk about more as we go along here is you don't see actually a lot of Godzilla.
No.
And when he's there, it feels very animal. Like they're very careful with what they do with him.
That sensibility is something that works. Less can be more sometimes with that kind of thing.
Also got to mention the score.
Incredible.
Iconic theme used for basically the rest of the series.
Yeah, it's always a banger when it drops. In the movie. I'm always kind of just waiting for it when I'm watching a Godzilla.
It's always
movie.
upsetting when they're not in it. Yeah. When it's not in a movie.
All right, Godzilla, legendary, top of the list for now. Will it stay there?
For now,
it might. Next up on our list, Mothra versus Godzilla in 1964. Now, you guys are going to have to chime in on this because I am not aware of the eras of Godzilla.
This is the Showa era, which is technically the same as the original. Okay. But I would say I think we picked another one from the Showa era to show the difference. Because Godzilla, the original one's very serious, very dramatic, and they start getting more goofy, big fights. I would say this one is still kind of serious in some of its aspects.
I think a lot of people would say that some of the worst Godzilla movies are in the Showa era.
What are you talking about?
You know what we're talking about. Don't bring him up.
Yeah, let's not say his name here. But so Mothra, at the end of the day, is, besides Godzilla, the best of the Toho monsters, I think.
So I just watched this movie for the first time. I hadn't seen this one before. Here's what I'll say about this movie. I think it kind of rules. You guys are right. Goofy. People are going to have different takes on it. I'm down for the goofy. I'm down for the people in suits. I'm down for the random little women that show up to be like foreseeing the future and warning people about the dangers of things. Again, we got some similar themes going on here about people not respecting nature and so on and so on. But the thing I think I like the most about this movie is I think this is the epitome of Godzilla's just throwing a tantrum.
Yeah. 100%.
I said earlier, we were talking before we recorded a little bit, and I was saying that I love whenever Godzilla is like a little bitch.
Yeah.
Because it varies how much of a little bitch he is. In the first movie, it's very serious. He's not really in that mode. But in this one, he's taking a nap, and there's a typhoon, and it wakes him up. And then he's just like throwing bows. Like he's upset for, I don't know why. He's just messing things up. And they're like, Mothra, help, please. And I kind of think that that's awesome. And I also think it's awesome that he gets got by two little worms using like string shot on him.
The Mothra larvae.
Yeah.
I think he stomps his feet at one point.
Yeah, he does.
Like a child.
Yeah. It's like
he does a tantrum on the ground at one point.
Yeah. He's just like losing it.
It's definitely, we're still in the part of Godzilla's legacy where he was still the villain. He will become the hero in a few more movies, or even like the next movie.
Very next movie. Yeah. And then he stays a hero for the rest of the Showa era.
Yeah, but at this point, he's still a villain, so, he's throwing little tantrums. Mothra's the hero.
He's a villain, but like, you still kind of like him. This is definitely like where they started to realize that kids like these movies a lot. So it's a very kid-friendly movie. But to your point earlier, Xander, I do appreciate that they still sort of try to keep a humanitarian message in there. And there is sort of a socio-political awareness too, with sort of a critique of these businessmen.
Corporations.
Who also throw a little tantrum and kill each other. And it's great. I love it.
Yeah, but it's just so perfect that, like something weird and unusual, a Mothra egg shows up and they immediately try to monetize it.
Yep.
I mean,
not crazy to think of.
Wow, still pretty poignant.
Pretty plausible.
2024.
Now, I just want to say one thing that makes Mothra so great is so many of the monsters in these movies are just like, it's a giant crab, it's a giant spider, but Mothra is like, she is a giant moth, but there's...
I was trying to see where he was going to go with that.
But there's a whole mythology here. It's a completely different backstory. Like, she's not just a giant moth. Like,
it's
there's
just like a deity
island
and the
and there's
reincarnation.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on. It's very fantastical, which is not something that we had seen in Godzilla movies.
Yeah. Which really helps because she had her own movie before this, which is fantastic also.
Yeah, I would recommend.
Unlike some of the other ones, which, the giant crab is great.
I do love the giant crab.
Like a beetle, I think he's
just like a lobster man.
Yeah, who knows what his name is.
But it adds a completely different flavor to it than if she was, one day there was just a giant moth.
Yeah. This might be a hot take between the group, but I like this movie a lot until the fight, because I feel like the flying fights in the early Godzilla, they didn't know what to do.
Well, but Mothra flaps her wings and she blows a lot of air.
I do like this movie, but the fight is not as good as some of the other ones.
I do agree with you.
But also, you just have to respect that Mothra is not a person in a suit. Right. They couldn't do that.
Yeah, it's a giant puppet.
So it's
beautiful.
Again, like something that makes Mothra unique. But if we're wrapping up, and we're talking about ranking, it's definitely not as good.
No.
The original Godzilla.
No. Hey, Mothra, you're a queen, but
not better than the original.
No,
the original is a classic.
Yeah. Sorry to Mothra.
Moving on, the Heisei era, Godzilla versus Destroyah, 1995.
The Heisei era, well, since we just talked about eras, I would say is a lot of them deal with like this darker themes, darker shooting. Godzilla in general, even though he defeats a villain, he's not really like a good guy in most of these.
It's enemy of my enemy in this one for sure.
Exactly. Godzilla versus Destroyah is the finale. And that's part of what I like about this movie so much is it feels like a proper Godzilla finale. Like everything's coming to a head in a lot of ways. They bring back the actress from the original Godzilla. They bring back the oxygen destroyer from the original Godzilla, and that leads into the monster in this. And then one of the best parts about this to me is sort of Godzilla's impending death, his heart meltdown, which is really a nuclear meltdown. And I really love how all of the sort of the threads of this movie come together in the climax.
I do agree. Yeah, all the thematic threads and all of it just coming together. Also mixed with amazing monster design. I think Destroyah is one of the best looking designs they've come up with.
Again, we're talking about trying to set these movies apart. I think a lot of the ways that they do that are with the antagonist. We talked about Mothra has a cool design, Destroyah has a cool design. But it's cool to give Godzilla a little bit of a more substantial redesign than he's had before. Because he kind of does get changed over the years. We have many friends who would describe Godzilla as cute. I think that depends on which version of Godzilla you're looking at. They think all of them. I don't agree, but...
We're going to speak of one later that's not cute.
There's no way. But I love the guys in suits. And what I think is so great about the filmmaking with it is I think they really understand scale. Now, if you don't like miniature work and stuff like that, and it takes you out of it, fair enough. But I think for me, they feel really grounded. They do a lot of work with people in the foregrounds to try and make you feel like, oh, this is like a really big climactic event that's happening. And I really like that about them. And I think that's something that kind of gets lost when you get into the CG realm, where it doesn't ever feel grounded. You don't ever feel like there's real people there or real spaces that are being occupied by these monsters. And I think that's really strong in this one.
There's always a charm to the practical effects. And I think this one, Godzilla versus Destroyah, it's the sweet spot in terms of the effects.
I would say, yeah, in general, the Heisei, I think, are my favorite looks. Consistently great effects. It's the practical before the digital. Some of them have some digital that's not too bad.
And speaking earlier about the new monster, Destroyah, and effects, one thing that's great about this monster, this villain, is the way he starts out as sort of a ground level monster, like a human size monster. And that allows for a lot of horror sequences. There's some, suspenseful stuff, some aliens adjacent stuff with the Destroyah creatures.
Yeah, that stuff all works very well. And it gives different textures to the film instead of just big monster fighting or people talking, which both are great, but it allows breakup, allows a different...
He evolves as a character too, and so the movie's kind of segmented into the different stages of Destroyah, which is kind of cool as well.
Yeah,
exactly. I want to shout out the score on this one too. Of the Godzilla films that I've seen, other than the original, I think this one's got a banger score.
Yeah, and this is the original composer again,
there you go.
Akira Ifukube, who did a lot of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of them hit harder than others. And this one really hits.
You agree? You like this one? Yeah. I think this one rules.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, most of the Godzilla films have great scores, but anytime he comes back, it's going to be amazing.
I think it ends really strongly too. I was talking about iconic Godzilla images earlier when we were talking about the original. I think one of the iconic Godzilla images is the final shot of the movie when Godzilla has died, but then in the wake of his explosion, it's brought Junior back from the dead, and it's like this perfect full circle, the king is dead, long live the king sort of moment.
With this beautiful backlight filling through the smoke, and you just see his silhouette as he roars. It's a great shot.
Yeah.
Where are we putting Destroyah?
I personally put it above Mothra.
I agree. This is better than Mothra.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah. Cool. It doesn't touch the original though.
No. There's a pretty big drop off for me from the original to these next two. Even though I enjoy all three of the ones we've talked about so far.
Well, it's tough. I mean, the original is like one of
the best
cinema's all-time classic films.
Yeah. All right, so next up on the list, Godzilla Final Wars from 2004.
Extremely 2000s.
What an insane movie, dude. I think that this is Godzilla if it was Mission Impossible 2 and The Matrix as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is super 2000s. Yeah, think Mission Impossible 2, think Die Another Day.
Yeah.
Jason X, but way crazier.
Somehow crazier than any of those films.
Listen, I respect it. They don't waste any time. They're like, there's a bunch of monsters. We got rid of Godzilla, and hey, there's mutants now. And now there's aliens, and now Godzilla and the aliens are fighting, and we're friends. It's insane. But you know what? They really swung hard on a style for it. There is some cool action. There's some not as cool action, but it's action packed for sure. We're talking before about some of the other movies lean a little bit too hard, a little bit too long into two people in suits hitting each other. This one's got motorcycle fights. It's got sea serpent fights. It's got Godzilla fights.
Got King Caesar kicking Angaras.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
To be clear, the motorcycle fight is two people on the same motorcycle.
Correct.
Punching each other in the face.
Right.
Perfect.
Now, this is a new era. This is the Millennium era. It's also the last movie of the Millennium era, and probably the first one where I feel like they've
hit what they were trying to do in the Millennium era.
Yeah.
Well, because the big conceit is that each one of these movies is supposed to be in this era not connected. Different reboots, different ideas on Godzilla. That was their original idea.
This one, oh wow, they do it. I mean, this movie, if any given person on the planet watched this movie, it would probably be in their top 10 craziest movies of all time.
Yeah.
It would maybe be a bit less crazy if you're someone like me or Chris who's seen every Godzilla movie.
Yeah, because they references a lot.
But it would probably still be in your top 10 craziest movies you've ever seen.
It's pretty wild.
It's insane. It's the reason why I really wanted this to be in the list.
Yeah.
Because I feel like not only is it insane, which is a good different take from all the other ones. But also, this doesn't really matter as much, but I like the idea that it really references the whole history of Godzilla. There's so much
but
reference.
where's Megalon?
No one cares about him. That's why he's not here.
Me and Chris were trying to figure this out. I think Megalon is the only monster from the Showa era that is not in this.
It does seem like it. It seems like they did it on purpose.
Justice for Megalon.
No, they did it on purpose.
It's fucked up.
This movie really does have a different style, but it's a very welcome style. It feels very Japanese to me, and it, in the best way. Feels anime. It feels like it could be a video game. We were watching it. We were talking about Street Fighter and all these, Dragon Ball Z and stuff, and it evokes those things in the best possible ways. Like, it's really delightfully over the top.
A big touchstone for me, just from being one of the earliest things I saw that was Japanese as a kid, was Power Rangers, and giving a lot of that vibe to me with some of the human action, because that's not something that's in many Godzilla movies. I think Godzilla movies always has this balance that they're trying to strike between a human story and a monster story. Some get the balance better than others. Some movies, the monster story is good and the human story is bad. Some stories, it's the other way. But action is never really a part of the human story. Again, from the 10 Godzilla films that I've seen. But this one, very much a part of it, and it very much has that sensibility, which is cool. I like it.
I mean, to shout out some of the fights, I feel like a lot of them are so good. Like the first fight Godzilla and Gigan have, amazing. He
Gigan
shoots
gets fucking
Godzilla.
God,
Godzilla one-shots him and then just throws the chain off like it's nothing.
This is little bitch Godzilla.
Yeah, he goes after everyone for no reason.
There are some brutal kills in this one.
Godzilla's a thank you next guy on this one.
Yeah, but I completely back up with what you're saying. I mean, as someone who has seen all the Godzilla movies, the humans don't really get into that much action. They get into some espionage here and there, and they do all sorts of adventuring and stuff.
There's
sometimes
a Terminator runtime.
They build cool robots.
Yeah, sometimes they pilot a giant monster, but this one, they're getting into as much action as Godzilla. Another iconic image, the human fist fight happening with the Godzilla fist fight happening
As they're just pounding
on the
away
screen
at
behind him.
Loved it.
Mirroring
Loved it.
each other.
It tries to have some kind of message about who you are as a person. It's not as strong as like any of the really, really good ones. But again, it does what it needs to do, and you're not like bored watching the characters. You're not ever bored watching them. I mean, especially, I really wish I remembered his name. Mustache Man is amazing. I love every moment he's on screen because it's so ridiculous. And also, Final Wars is a great ending to this era.
Yeah.
And seemingly an end for a really long time until they made another one. But like, I understand what they're wanting to go out on a big bang for at least a little bit.
And it was a very big bang.
Yeah.
All right, where are you guys putting Final Wars?
I personally am going to put it above Mothra, but below Destroyah.
It goes above Mothra for me. I could maybe put it above Destroyah. It's
I
in
could
contention.
understand.
I could go either way, so I'm interested.
I could
to hear
understand
what
that.
Xander said.
It is a thing where it would kind of depend on my mood with this one. I would go above or below Mothra. I don't think I would put it above Destroyah.
Okay. So then it's definitely above. It's definitely
So I go above. I guess we go above Mothra.
But I think on a certain day I could also put it above Destroyah. But we'll put it below Destroyah right now.
Yeah.
Because I do love the insanity
Yes.
that is this movie.
Yes.
I love the part when they used the armadillo as a soccer ball. That was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
More
amazing.
Of that.
This
More
is
of
why
that, please.
It's
this
great.
is actually the last suit Godzilla. So
Oh,
enjoy
yeah,
it
you're
while it
right.
lasts.
Yeah, that's true. It's sad. And he looks great. It's a great design.
Yeah,
He's slightly different from the other ones in this era. Beautiful design.
Yeah.
All right, so the list: Godzilla versus Destroyah, Godzilla Final Wars, Mothra versus Godzilla. Next up had to be Shin Godzilla from 2016. Big gap between these two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing big gaps between our picks, but this is actually just the gap between the Japanese produced, the Toho Godzilla movies.
It's crazy. Also, Uggo. Straight
He's
up ugly
a
Godzilla.
big Uggo. I don't like the new design, but I like that they did
it.
a new design. It doesn't feel like Godzilla to me, but I really appreciate, like you said, Tim, going for something new when you've got this big catalog of films. I do really like the concept of Godzilla evolving. He's been irradiated. There's some kind of human interference that has made him the way that he is.
To that point, we should note again, this is a new era, the Reiwa era. Something that's interesting about this is there were continuity reboots, but every single time they always consider the original Godzilla part of the continuity. This is the first Japanese Godzilla movie that does not consider any other movie whatsoever part of the continuity. So they did have that freedom to do something completely different with Godzilla. And that's something that I really appreciate about this movie. It brings the terror back to Godzilla, because there's that fear of the unknown.
Yeah. I just love the design, truthfully, because it is horrifying. And it also, I think, reinforces the idea of the film that he is like a creature in pain. He's evolving to keep himself alive. He's not, wouldn't say maliciously trying to kill everyone, but everyone's trying to kill him. And he's just constantly trying to keep himself alive. And it's just like this otherworldly fish monster kind of thing coming to land.
I mean, this one to me feels the most similar to the original of any of the ones we've talked about today, because I think, you know, we talked about in the original that Godzilla is actually not a huge part of it. There's a large part of it that is Dr. Shirazawa and the bureaucratic parties trying to figure out, oh, how are we going to kill Godzilla? Like, what are we going to do? And this movie kind of harkens back to that. Most of the movie is really about how a government would handle a crisis if a kaiju washed up on the shore.
Well, I feel like parallels the real world. How does a government deal with a disaster, which Japan had been experiencing?
Yeah, like the original movie was dealing with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and this movie is dealing with the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear meltdown. You know, to your point, Xander, about this being about bureaucracy, maybe even underselling it. Like, this is probably 90% a movie about people in office rooms. And we're talking about how crazy Final Wars is. In a way, this is just as crazy.
I agree.
Like, this is arguably the most unique film in the entire series.
Across the board, too, like the way it's shot.
Yeah.
The design. We're talking about the Godzilla design. Like, everything about it is really specific and unique and doesn't feel like the other ones.
Yeah, it's almost documentary in some ways.
Yeah, it's got like that Cloverfield kind of vibe to a lot of the scenes.
Yeah, it's very like Contagion, or even like All the President's Men, or The Big Short, or like the fact that those are the main like reference points is wild. And it's really also a satire in a lot of ways of, you know, all the red tape and, you know, the different government agents who sort of, there's a scene where someone gives someone an order and then people are like, is that for me? Like, they don't even know how to deal with this situation, and they have so many different redundancies in their infrastructure.
It's giving me Ikaru.
Yeah, honestly.
Well, it's interesting to be able to add suspense in the human scenes by the way that it's shot and edited. In Shin Godzilla, I think they're going with the assumption like, okay, you know what Godzilla is. Some bad shit's about to go down, and you're watching this government flounder and struggle to figure out how they can possibly deal with it.
And it seems like it would be the opposite of what you want from a Godzilla movie, to be like 80% people in office rooms like talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a suspense to it, and there's a humor to it also. I mean, there's this running gag throughout the movie where they always label who people are, and some people, their labels just continue to grow every time you see them, as you know,
that's pretty great.
More issues arise in the ongoing crisis.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. I feel like it really does harken back to that, the old feeling of the other one. And this is the first one that we've talked about. There's been others where he's not fighting another monster. He's just existing against the humans.
Yeah, he's back to fucking up.
It's not the first one since the original that it's happened, but it's the first one we've talked about.
I think too, I want to shout out the ending of this one. The final shot of Godzilla is very scary but very cool.
Another iconic image. Yeah. The little, I don't even know what those
Godzilla
are.
people or
but
whatever.
That's exactly what's so scary about it. Like, I don't even know what the fuck I'm looking at. Like these little skeletal creatures.
I know people say they want a sequel, but they don't want a sequel. You'd like to keep that open-ended terror, the fear you don't know what it is.
Exactly.
Because if you ever answered it, it's not as interesting anymore.
Yeah.
Where are you guys putting Shin?
Ooh, this goes high for me.
I think this is below the original for me. That's second.
I completely agree. I think this is a really effective Godzilla movie.
Yeah, I could go either way. I mean, I'll let it go below the original. I'd probably myself put it below Destroyah. I'm partial to the guys in the suits.
Yeah.
I like that. And that I think is a really strong one of that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the downsides of this movie, it's very CGI heavy. It's not always the most.
It's not always
believable.
perfect, but it's
It gets the job done.
All right. Next one up on the list. No suits. Godzilla vs. Kong 2021. It felt like we had to include one of the American Godzilla movies.
And I would put this really high for me.
This was a fun one. Do you know what I mean? This felt like a good one to be the representative of the legendary pictures Godzilla movies.
This, I think, is when it really hit its stride. This is the third Godzilla movie in the
Third
Monsterverse.
one, fourth movie in the Monsterverse, but third
movie.
Godzilla.
Yeah. This, to me, is the perfect popcorn blockbuster, shut your brain off, but like in the best way. Yes, you can poke holes. Obviously, this is not how the universe works. There's no way that the Earth is hollow, obviously. But like, it's just so fun.
The Earth is flat. Yeah, of course it's not hollow because it's flat, dude.
my God. But I mean, a giant monkey has a big axe, and that makes this movie
Like,
almost
where's the
100 times
light come
amazing.
from in the middle of the Earth, dude? How's it right in there?
It's just fucking cool.
It's
Like,
so great.
You gotta love it. Now, I think some Godzilla fans might give this flack because it's more of a Kong movie than Godzilla. So maybe some of that stuff we won't talk about as much. But I think at its core, spiritually, this is way more a Godzilla movie than a Kong movie. Kong might have more screen time.
He might be like almost the main character, but it's still
He's the
Godzilla.
hero of it.
Yeah,
But
which is not uncommon for
like
Godzilla
this
film.
to me is like Showa era resurrected. I mean, technically, the Showa era did the Hollow Earth first.
Yes.
In Godzilla versus Megalon.
Why are you bringing it up?
With
Hell yeah, let's go.
with the Seatopians.
Oh my gosh.
So this feels
Best one, number one on the list.
and then of course
Dropkick alone.
And then of course the main villain of this ends up being Mechagodzilla, who we haven't talked about because he didn't make it on.
Somehow he didn't make it on the
Shout
list.
out to Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, which is one of the best Showa films.
I agree.
But bringing that in,
They didn't pick it. It wasn't me.
bringing Mechagodzilla in, there's a certain inherent goofiness to the idea of making a giant robot Godzilla to fight Godzilla.
Even if I don't love the two before it, I will say it's kind of missing some of the Godzilla as a force of nature that the other two legendary Godzilla films had before it. It's slightly missing from this one, so you kind of missed out on an underlying theme. But in general, this movie just rocks from beginning to end.
To me, this is surprisingly really high on my list of Godzilla movies. In fairness, a lot of that has to do with me being a huge King Kong fan, and I think this is a great King Kong movie. If you talk about human plots in Godzilla movies, the humans aren't amazing in this, but I do love Brian Tyree Henry.
He's a real freak in this one.
He's a real freak in this one, and I don't know. I think he's really funny. They give him just enough of a backstory with the little flask and his wife and all that.
Also, just like the fight on the aircraft carrier, their first fight, they go at it. Amazing. Again, does it make sense that Godzilla can stand on an aircraft carrier? No, but who cares? I don't care.
I mean, Godzilla
But specifically this Godzilla.
Godzilla at least can swim. What's Kong gonna sink, dude?
He was sinking.
I know.
Godzilla does get his due in this movie. I mean, he destroys Kong the first time they see each other.
Even the second.
One of my favorite climaxes, one of my favorite fights in any Godzilla movie is when Godzilla and Kong, enemies to lovers, they team up against Mechagodzilla. Just
and just wreck his shit.
Honestly, just like pure euphoria when they tag team and destroy that fucking robot piece of shit.
I'm not big on this one. It's fine. Like, I enjoy it. It's a fun. I agree with you, Tim. It's a fun popcorn movie. I think for me, this is in that human Godzilla story balance. I don't really care about the humans. They're not bad. It's passable, and there's not too much screen time on it, which is good. But I also think I said before that something I really liked about Destroyah and some of the other ones was I feel like there's a good sense of scale and reality and grounding. And I think the legendary ones don't do a good job with that. And I think it's partially down to the CG, but I also just think it's some of the way that they shoot things. You almost forget that they're in Hong Kong at the end. It doesn't feel like they're in a space to me. And that loses me a lot in the fights because I like feeling like they're a part of our world and not this separate, weird, fake thing. And this movie has that vibe to me. It doesn't hit as high for me. It's just not what I want out of a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, it is the, like I said, Showa vibes. Showa resurrected. Most Showa movies towards the end were just Godzilla
one like
and a
room
monster
of mountains
in a field. This to me, I hear what you're saying. It does get to a point where it's more about the monsters, but you know, I don't mind. I like that. To me, the monsters are often more interesting. You know, Kong to me is the most interesting character in this movie.
Oh yeah.
All right, this is going to be an interesting one. Where are you guys putting it?
I'm putting it above Destroyah and below Shin.
I have to agree. I almost want to put it above Shin, but in terms of ranking Godzilla movies, I'd put it below Shin, but above Destroyah.
This is like dead bottom for me.
All right, so how are we going to figure this out?
Well, I mean, we got to weight it a little bit up because you
right.
both put it above. So I suppose above Final Wars.
All right, I can live with
I'll
it.
take it. I'll take it.
Last on the list, Godzilla Minus One, 2023.
It's like my favorite. Truthfully, it was my favorite film of last year.
I cannot believe how good it was, because the original Godzilla is great, but it's also a classic. So it has that going for it. It's got nostalgia going on, and sometimes things are of their time. Do you know what I mean? Where there's, we've gone through a bunch of films, and Godzilla, the original, has stayed the top of the list for every film we've talked about. It's never even been that close where we were considering putting one of these. And so you start to wonder, like, oh, did Godzilla just like hit that perfect moment of when it was meant to come out? But then this comes out, so many years later, 1954 to 2023. And it also hits so hard with a very similar take, but also a lot of like new themes going on for a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, it has an extremely strong human storyline.
Absolutely.
Not that the Godzilla storyline is not strong. They're both strong, which makes the best Godzilla films, but the human storyline is one of the best.
Yeah.
Or even the best.
I would say bar none, the main character in this movie, Shikishima, easily, not even close, the best human character
I agree.
in any Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
In any monster movie.
Yeah. It's just so powerful. Just everything about it.
This is just an awesome examination of loss and PTSD, but put in the lens of a Godzilla monster movie.
Yeah, and survivor skill.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Shikishima starts, where he's this kamikaze pilot who lost his nerve, as they would say. You could take out Godzilla and it would still be a really good movie or a really interesting movie. And I think it is a really interesting character to look at, because that is, a very important part of history and a kind of person, a kamikaze pilot, that I can't think of another movie that's about a kamikaze pilot.
No.
It's like this great, they said it specifically after World War II, and I think to really talk about the transition from World War II into now. Like the idea of what they had to do in the military and what they all had to do for a country that maybe didn't really care about them because they were soldiers, but then they having to come together to try to solve their own problem.
Yeah. Ultimately, the finding, the strength within you to move on and build something new and to live, essentially, is incredibly moving. And that's something that's really interesting about this movie, is it's actually really emotional, which you don't expect going in. But I will say, in terms of how the story is so interesting without Godzilla, I think Godzilla is very important.
The Ginza attack is so brutal and placed so poignantly in the story to really, really hit just when you're starting to feel like they're rebuilding their lives. Everything gets taken away. It's so brutal. And it's been said, they won the Academy Award for visual effects. It looks incredible. They did such an amazing job. I've been ranting and raving about the guys in suits. This is by far, for me, the best CG Godzilla.
Well, the design is really
It's
good.
incredible.
I love when Godzilla is craggly. That's my issue with the Monsterverse one. He's too sleek, bit too alligator.
Yeah.
But when he's craggly, that's great.
Speaking back to that scene, I kept thinking about the shot of his breath basically creating a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Him standing there roaring, and then you cut back to the main character, and it's just like the
Insane.
scream and just like the rain of. It's just like incredible shots,
Instantly iconic Godzilla
exactly.
images. Talking about how important Godzilla is, every time Godzilla shows up in Shikishima's life, it it impacts his story and it moves him forward. The attack on Ginza is so important to Shikishima's story because when he loses Noriko, I feel like that's the moment where he realizes that no, like he actually does have an investment in this world. There are people he cares about.
Well, and you said this, but Godzilla being that vessel for those big inflection points with his character is really brilliant screenwriting. I mean, he's basically going to get arrested because the people at the base where he is kind of know something suspicious is going on. So Godzilla saves his life in that moment, but also kind of ruins it because then he survives and, he goes through all of these emotions.
Yeah.
He comes
and then he's
back.
guilty about not being able to stop Godzilla too.
Exactly.
In addition to...
He comes back and then he starts trying to rebuild his life and Godzilla comes and rips that away, like you're saying. But then Godzilla offers him this moment of redemption. He can actually fulfill what he failed to do, what he perceives as being his failure of not going through with being the kamikaze pilot, and he thinks that's what he's going to do. And then being able to move past that and stop Godzilla but still live is such a great character arc.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a really emotional moment when he makes that final decision. But also, I mean, let's just say it, like, that climax is fucking incredible.
Yeah.
Like, just on a purely blockbuster cinema, it's like one of the best blockbuster climaxes I've seen in a long time.
Where you guys want to put Godzilla Minus One?
I struggle with this so hard.
This is the real question.
I'll start. Number 1. I've thought about it for a while. It's my favorite.
I struggle because I get it. I'm going to put it number 2.
Number 2. Tim?
I knew this would come. I knew
Xander
Xander would put Godzilla Minus One.
Did you know?
At the top.
How'd you know?
I knew Chris would put it below the original.
And now you got it this side.
In my mind, though, like, the original is an incredible piece of cinema. It's not untouchable. It's not a movie without any issues. I think at the end of the day, one of the issues of that movie, there are some interesting human characters, but we've talked about the whole time, human versus monster. And I think the human story wins out in Minus One for me. And the monster story is equally good. So I think by that math, Minus One is +1.
Let's go.
I'm not mad about it. I flip-flop back and forth on this all the time.
I mean, your logic is pretty much the same as mine. Amazing films. And last up on the list, Godzilla vs. Megalon. The actual number
Negative
one.
100.
The actual number
Negative
one.
100.
The drop kick, dude, when he fucking slides on his tail.
It's not bad.
It's
just
cool.
You haven't seen the rest of the movie.
You guys are like, oh, it's cool when he does that nuke and stands with the silhouette. But what about when he leans back on his tail and slides across the whole
They all
plane?
have really cool moments. Doesn't mean the rest of the movie's good.
The jump and dance in Invasion of Astro Monster. That's
What about the fist bump in Godzilla vs. Megalon?
Or what about the fact when he grabs his tail and he flies through the air in Godzilla and Dora?
Well,
So
there's a lot to love in Godzilla. This is just a sample,
taste.
a little taste.
So the Rats on Film official ranking for Godzilla. Starting from the bottom, Mothra versus Godzilla, Godzilla Final Wars, Godzilla vs. Kong, Godzilla vs. Destroyah, Shin Godzilla, Godzilla, and the big cheese of the show, Godzilla Minus One.
Everyone should go watch Godzilla films.
Well, I'll just say, hopefully you'll have forgotten how the episode started, and I'll say, go Godzilla.
Thanks for listening to Rats on Film, everybody. Follow us where you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. Follow us on Letterboxd and Instagram, Rats on Film Pod. We'll post this list and all the future lists we make on there. And we'll be back at some point to talk about more kaijus, maybe? But definitely more movies.
Maybe.
Bye, everybody.